Oh hell, internet. The last part, well done if you've watched them all. Look, I'm not ignorant of the fact that there's a lot I don't know. And the things I've talked about have been quite big picture and broad brush. I hope that makes them intuitively accessible, but I also know it makes them very hand-wavy and imprecise. But I have referred to all the different specific areas of study that I think have been built up to the point where things that I've referenced have been fairly uncontroversial. You know where the comments are if you disagree. But I see both sides in many of these issues fighting battles they should concede. Both sides have their fundamentalist advocates, and I know that those are a huge minority. But the majority is not taking on and articulating where the agreement is, for fear of, I don't know, getting lost in the mix. But I mean, the best example perhaps is religion. You know, so many different types of Christianity, they're not the same religion. And there are people doing things in the name of Christianity that many other people who consider themselves Christian would find disgusting. But they will allow those people to continue to call themselves Christian so that you can say that there are X billion Christians in the world as a monolith. That is how things become more polarized as I see it. And then sooner or later everyone starts to hate the fence sitters who just want everyone to get some of what they want, which, as I said at the outset, I thought that's how representative politics was supposed to work. And all of these evasion tactics might have worked 200 years ago when there were still untamed wildernesses for minorities to go off and exploit. But the 20th century has showed us that the interactions of humanity in a mass society have achieved this difference in kind, and now those old systems do not function, at least until we can start to colonize outer space. We need a new system here, and I am not in favor of any revolution, ever, but we left incremental change behind with the death of the old world. It's understandable. The human tolerance for societal change is based on evolutionary timescales. Moral panic is genuinely a natural instinct, but in the modern mass society, it is a counterproductive one. And I would say an irresponsible one if you ignore the data that we now have. And if you have any interest in humanity continuing to prosper beyond your solitary century on this world. And if you do feel like that, then I don't hate you. But my belief structure compels me to see your lack of concern as morally dubious. But I'm obviously open to discuss it. With all of that said, I genuinely do fear that we are heading into some kind of darkest timeline. Although, of course, we should not be looking to go to either extreme. I am not a prophet of doom, and there is always another morning. But in the darkest timeline, the climate will disintegrate over a generation. Technology will rob the masses of productive labor, the rich will continue to get richer, and the poor will die away as they fail to ask for anything more because they are manipulated by fear. This sounds like a conspiracy theory. It does, but the decades keep going past and nothing gets done. And there are endless examples of this idiocy. And yes, right wing, that does include all of the socialist revolutions of the 20th century. Those were ridiculous mistakes. But let he who is without sin cast the first stone, you sanctimonious pricks. Humanity as a whole is failing to rise proactively to the challenges of the modern mass society, and there is more than enough blame to go around. But the responsibility can fall more heavily on some than others, and those with the most power, by definition, have the most opportunity to make changes, and so bear the most responsibility for the lack of change. And I have some sympathy with their position, genuinely, because the powerful are human, and for better or worse, there are many who are good people too, but it is clear that taken as a mass individual, their avarice is out of control. And like I say, doesn't require them to be bad people. And I don't begrudge, say, Jeff Bezos, whatever he has in his life. But you can't tell me that to have as much resources he has access to and to continue to try and get more does not represent a pathological mindset towards the idea of resource generally. And again, I think I understand it. You know, resource as a continually infinitely acquirable idea is a new thing in human history, just like speed is when we created the internal combustion engine. It's an intoxicating idea. It's an idea that people can become addicted to. In a mass society, change is incessant. In a way, it always was, but it was too slow to perceive in the space of one human life. But that time is long past. The world you die in will not comfortably resemble the world you were born in. For most of human history, this was not the case. And this is why we must all be ready to accept some changes that we might ourselves consider radical. It is also, though, why we must attempt to feel compassion for the discomfort experienced by all those who experience radical changes. But I do want to close on what I want to call the lightest timeline. Although, of course, we should not be looking to go to either extreme. I am not a prophet of light, and there are no utopias. But in the lightest timeline, the world will come together to divert game-changing resources to switching to a greener energy budget. Private industry and governments will forge a revitalized and united space program which can open up the resources of the solar system to us. And massive amounts of data can be collected and used to create intuitive new technological systems, a real AGI that can lift up the human spirit rather than suppressing and manipulating it. Aging can be conquered, allowing for unlimited human lifespans, and believe me, the resources of the solar system can accommodate that. These are just a few of the facets of the modern world which we've neglected to develop in our tribal idiocy. But I continue to try to believe that the corner can be turned, or rock bottom can be reached, if you will, and that people as a mass individual can be better, whatever the hell that means. And yet I can also hear the voice inside that says this is some kind of hippie moonshine. It's impossible and you're completely crazy. But my fundamental response to that voice, still untested, is that in the modern mass society there is a difference which we can make use of. Yes, in the historical and natural context, these ideas were hippie moonshine. Past tense, perhaps not so now. But that said, I'm not looking for any kind of revolution, and you can certainly call me out for my identity-based bias there if you like. But I would say back to those people, one thing we certainly can learn from the 20th century revolutions is that revolutions are invariably vulnerable to megalomaniacal fuckheads with a populist message somehow resonating with the people. And unless you are extremely confident of the education and political engagement of your population, then you should be extremely cautious advocating for a revolution of any kind. That's just how it is, and that is the state of the show. Ta-da!